Now that I'm recording, let me verify that yeah. Now I've muted and unmuted myself. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have you here. So today is our Relaxing to Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting. And let's see how much relaxation, health, wealth, and happiness we can receive. So that's the invitation is to receive. And to receive, we can maybe think that that's a entirely passive process, but actually it's a fully engaged process. So the difference being that if it was an entirely passive process, then there would be no need for you. You know, I mean, if you kind of think about this, ask yourself, why are you here? You know, is it, and really sincerely ask yourself that so that you can really contemplate that. So ask yourself, why am I here? And in this context, I mean that in the largest sense. Why are you here? Why do you exist? What is this life? And so is the purpose of this life just entirely passive? Is that why you're here? Is it just to watch it happen like a movie? And I suspect that when you ask yourself that sincerely, that you know very clearly that it's not just passive in that sense, that you are here purposefully so that there's a need for you to be here. It's not that it's not like you were not made as a mistake. It's not that whoops, sorry about that. Just I guess you'll have to wait it out until the end. So, no, it's that you're here purposefully. So we want to engage with that purpose. And so this relaxation is an engaged relaxation. It's not an entirely passive process. Passive in the sense, what I mean would be like being unconscious, like you could just take some sort of narcotic and be put out like an anesthetic. And so you just could be anesthetized, and then you wouldn't have to feel anything or have any awareness of any kind. You could just be completely knocked out. And that's not, I mean, apart from perhaps that not being entirely an option, it's also just not really that desirable. So what we can't get, what we really are here for, we can't really fulfill our purpose if we're just anesthetized. And you might wonder, why am I going on about this? I don't really know entirely. I mean, I'm often as surprised as you might be as to what comes out of my mouth. But the message that I'm trying to communicate is that you have that you being present is essential in the whole process. And by you being present, then life can begin to flower and something really wonderful can unfold. But then notice that oftentimes we don't choose to engage. We think we would rather be anesthetized. We'd rather be checked out. And then ask yourself, why is that? What is it that you hope that you will gain by being anesthetized? What benefit will there be? So just actually first of all, take a look and see that some amount of time in your life, you imagine somehow that you would rather be anesthetized. You'd rather not have to deal with it. You'd rather not be here. You'd rather not be present. And then ask yourself, what do you hope to gain from that? So in I won't tell you why. Some of you will find out why at a later date. But I've been thinking about Heracles. So Heracles is the Greek version of the Roman Hercules is the Roman version of Heracles. Same basic character, just different syllables kind of switched around there. But Heracles, at one point in his life, he's questioning, what is his purpose? What is he here for? What's he to do? Should he do this thing or that thing? What's the meaning of it all, kind of? And as if in fact, in answer to this prayer of his heart, these two characters come along, these two women, and one of them is very sort of boldly dressed and attired, and she appears very attractive to him initially, and the other one is a little bit more plainly attired and doesn't really get his attention in the same way at first. And they start to talk to him, and the first one, the one who's more initially attractive to him, says, come with me, and you will just have a life of pleasure. You will have, everything will be easy. You'll never have to lift a finger. You'll just have everything that you want will come to you. And won't that be nice? And then he says, well, I don't know, maybe, but who are you? Speaking to the other one, and the other one says, well, if you come, before I tell you my name, if you come with me, then you'll have a lot of challenges in your life. It won't be easy, but it will be purposeful, and it will be meaningful, and it will be valuable. And so then, choose now. Who do you want to go with? And he says, well, I know who I'm going to go with, but tell me your names. And the first one says her name is Pleasure, and the second one, her name is Virtue, I think is her name. And which makes it sound a bit moralistic, I suppose, this notion of virtue. But actually, it's not really a moral issue. It's just about the truth of who we are and why we're here. And so, if there was no purpose for you, if there was no need for you to be here, if all that was all his life was about was just luxury and pleasure and just having it your way, without challenge, without being called upon to discover something meaningful, purposeful, then really there's no sense in you being here at all. There's no purpose whatsoever. You're not needed. Then why bother? But fortunately, we're not actually in a position to have to choose in that way. You don't get to choose whether you want purpose or not. You are made with purpose. That's your entire existence is composed of purpose. That's why you exist as this individual. Because apart from that, and I've often invited us to explore this and discover this in our direct experience, and I'll invite you to discover it right now. Apart from that, what is there? So if you just let go of all of that, just for a moment, and you just notice what's here, that doesn't seek for anything. It's not seeking for pleasure, but it's also has no need for fulfillment or purpose. It's already absolutely complete. So this is clearly an aspect of ourselves. We could say it's the most essential self. But if this is known thoroughly through and through, then there's no you apart from this. So to the degree that there's some sense of being somebody, then that sense of being somebody is purposeful. Its purpose is to discover its purpose. Its purpose is to be purposeful. Its purpose. So in other words, we can't sidestep that. We can't get around that, because this has to be resolved. This purpose has to be resolved. It can't be otherwise. Now, there are, of course, a variety of methods by which we can resolve it, and some may be more direct, and some might be more indirect, and some might be they vary along different dimensions, and we could think about that and explore that if we wanted, but fundamentally, regardless of the method used, this has to be resolved. It's not something that we can sidestep. Hopefully I've made that point. So the invitation then is to actually be conscious about that and choose that, and to have that awareness so that we can satisfy our purpose in this life rather than wasting the life. And so I make this point, maybe it seems like too elementary, or I'm not sure, maybe it could appear in many different ways as somehow unimportant or trivial or not meaty enough or something. But I think it's really quite essential, and it is elementary. It is something that if we don't address this clearly, then what are the chances that we'll be successful in any sense of that word? If we don't know what our purpose is, if we don't know what our intention in life is, if we don't know why we're here, if we don't know what we're up to, if we don't have a sense of direction, then any direction will do, but not in a way that would satisfy our soul, only in the sense that some movement is happening, and if we're just thrown about by the wind or by the whims of the day or the moment, then we don't know that we're actually on our way in the correct way. And so we might just as well, I'd say we're more likely than not, if we don't have clarity of intention, more likely than not, we're headed in some direction that's opposite to the direction that we wish to be headed. Maybe opposite is not the right word, but not the direction that the direction that we want to be headed. Because you think, in a sense, there's infinitely many directions that can be taken, but there's only one that will resolve this for us. And so we've got a ratio of infinity to one. If we don't have clarity of what direction we want to be taking, then the odds are dramatically stacked against us. So for that reason, it seems like it's very, very, very important to have clarity of intention. And even before we can even address that issue of clarity of intention, we have to have a resolution within ourselves that this is actually true and important, because otherwise the temptation will be to go unconscious, because we're met with so many challenges in this life. And those challenges are, they're not new to us. They're see if I can explain this. So if we think about this life as having, it has an arc to it. So, like the notion that what goes up must come down kind of thing. So if you consider that the life has an arc, so it goes up and then it's going to resolve. So the resolution is this, metaphorically, in this case, it's this coming down. So we're kind of coming back through the same kind of general territory that we've already traversed, but that when we first, on that initial arc, stage of the arc of the journey of this lifetime, or more broadly, we could call it the life, the arc of a soul. Okay, there's all this territory that's gone through, and then we didn't resolve it. We didn't wrap it up. We opened a lot of stuff, but we didn't resolve those things. So on the second leg of the journey, as it were, we come back through the same basic kinds of things, the same territory, but now we have to wrap it up. So these are the kinds of things we keep encountering them, because these are the things that are there for us to resolve. But because we haven't resolved them, we experience them as challenges. Well, when we encounter challenges, we're not sufficiently clear that these challenges are purposeful, meaningful, and essential for the health and well-being of the soul, as it were, then we will tend to go into the same fall back into the same kind of state that we had previously gone into when we encountered these same kinds of things, which was not a state that provided sufficient clarity that could resolve the thing. So classically, this would be described as like a, in a like a hero's journey, that we would tell of tales of this hero who's going on a journey, who's encountering all kinds of challenges and has to overcome them, has to resolve them. So if it's not resolved, then it's not a satisfying story, for good reason. So, we don't tell of the hero's journey isn't one in which, the hero just goes from one thing to the next, never actually resolving any of them, but just sort of bumbling along and making a big mess, and then the end. These challenges have to be faced and resolved. And in the story, they take the guise of, monsters and so forth. So in our own lives, of course, we could connect to that in our own lives and recognize where we have all of these unresolved things that are like monsters in our consciousness, or maybe not even just in our consciousness, but that show up outwardly in our lives in the form of whatever they show up as. I mean, all the myriad types of challenges, the health challenges, relationship challenges, financial challenges, etc. So I'm not sure if any of this is making sense, so I'll try to clarify this. What I'm suggesting is that all of the things in our lives that we may be tempted to perceive as the problems and obstacles to living the good life, that whatever we imagine that would be, but that good life as we imagine it is usually just the life of pleasure, the life where there is no challenge and everything's just handed to us and it's all easy peasy and we can just eat chocolate cake all day. and like life is just consists of chocolate cake and orgasms. Sounds pretty nice, but actually I'm not a big fan of chocolate, to be honest with you. But that actually, if you tell the truth, wouldn't really be truly satisfying. And so all these things that we see as the obstacles or the problems that interfere with us having the good life as we imagine it should be. What I'm inviting us all to do is to envision ourselves in relationship to all of these things and see that all of these are not actually obstacles. It was an interesting sound. It was a rooster sound. They're not obstacles, but they're opportunities that are being delivered to us by the divine. If you can open your mind to such a notion, to support us in the fulfillment of our purpose, so that we can experience the true satisfaction and true pleasure, not the kind of pleasure that we've imagined, but a really much more meaningful pleasure. So the rooster agrees. So, okay, here's the invitation in a practical sense. So think about a problem that you have. Just choose one. Maybe it's hard to choose just one. That's one kind, maybe you think you have so many problems, it's hard to choose just one. Actually, that's better than the alternative, or an alternative, which would be to have so suppressed things that you can't even accept that maybe you have any kinds of problems. Of course, as we've often found through a certain type of inquiry, ultimately none of these problems exist as problems per se, but at the mundane level, all of us perceive that there's some kind of problems that we are dealing with. It just is like we have the sense that something shouldn't be. And so if you have some kind of physical pain, then you perceive that that shouldn't be. And if you have some kind of emotional pain, you have a sense that that shouldn't be. And if you're, it kind of sums it up, doesn't it? Physical pain and emotional pain. What other kind of problems do we have? I mean, they all kind of boil down to that. But we have some kind of sense that it shouldn't be. So that's what the problem is that we think this shouldn't be. So just choose one, if that's possible for you. Just narrow it down to one. And so I'll see if I can do this along with you. So see if I can just choose one problem, narrow it down. Okay. So we have, I'm not going to tell you what my one problem is, but you don't have to tell me what your one problem is either. But we've hopefully selected a problem. I've selected a problem. So just notice then what it is, how you imagine this as a problem. So in order to imagine it as a problem, it has to be that you think it shouldn't be. And if it shouldn't be, then there's some idea of what should be instead. Now that may not be well developed, or maybe it is well developed, but just see if you can start to become aware of this sense of how you think things should be instead of this. So it shouldn't be like this, and it should be this other way. Now, pretend that you can just snap your fingers, and if you can actually snap your fingers, you might actually snap your fingers, but pretend that snapping your fingers, that switch is made, so that the thing is that shouldn't be is no longer, and the thing that should be is. So just imagine that having done nothing more than just snap your fingers, so you didn't have to slay the dragon, you didn't have to confront the fear, you didn't have to come to terms with any of it, you didn't have to admit your weakness or your anything. You just snap your fingers and it's just chocolate cake and orgasms, or whatever you imagine it should be. And then just imagine that. Just imagine that's how it is. Just chocolate cake and orgasms. Or that's my version, your version of whatever it should be. I still don't know why I would say that. It's foolish. I really don't like chocolate cake. I don't know what, I just don't know what better to say. So that's all I can say. But just see if you can imagine that, and just now notice, how is that actually? How is that to just snap your fingers and the thing that shouldn't be is gone, and the thing that you imagine should be is? Do you feel satisfied? Do you actually feel good? Rooster says he feels pretty good. But how do you feel about it? I should have chosen the rooster as my problem. That would have been helpful, but I wasn't choosing the rooster as my problem. I was choosing something else. Okay, so maybe you find what I find, which is that actually I don't really want the thing that I think I want. And actually, in a strange way, I want the thing that I think I don't want. So if you can find that for yourself, then um, we can proceed together on this. And if it doesn't make any sense to you what I've just said, that's probably normal. Probably doesn't usually make a lot of sense what I say. So I guess you're used to that. But you can just play along with me a little bit longer and see if it makes any sense to you. So I'm proposing that actually we have deluded ourselves into thinking that this thing shouldn't be, because I think I don't want it, and instead I think I want this other thing that I think should be. But actually, that's not true. So, but we won't know that unless we actually are conscious and present and looking honestly at things. Otherwise, if we just kind of allow ourselves to play the usual bet, then we are largely unconscious and just continue to leave these things unresolved. We never face the thing actually. I'm reminded of there's uh, in the Odyssey. I think it's in the Odyssey on the return. I think the Odyssey is the return voyage with Odysseus and his crew. And at one point they land on the the Isle of Lotus Eater. I think it's the Isle of Lotus Eaters, or the land of Lotus Eaters. And the people there are the Lotus Eaters, and so the lotuses that they're eating are kind of narcotic or something of that sort. And these people are not really feeling their pain. They're just sort of well, I guess they're drug addicts. And so from what I recall, I mean, it's been a long time. I haven't read the Odyssey since I was in high school, and only barely then did I read it. In fact, I'm not sure that I actually read it properly, but I seem to recall that the much of the crew is seduced by the lotus eating, and so they're they're at risk of being stuck forever on this island and never completing their voyage, their return to their home. Somehow they're awakened from all of this and they make their way back to the ship and they leave. But I'm reminded of that because that's sort of the sense that I'm trying to convey here, is that when we encounter these challenges, we often will go unconscious. We're kind of, if there is such a word, narcotizing ourselves. If there's not such a word, I like it, so I'm going to invent it if it doesn't already exist. And one way we do that is by imagining this shouldn't be and this other thing should be. Shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't have these challenges. I shouldn't have to deal with this kind of thing. I shouldn't have this pain. I shouldn't have these struggles. Shouldn't have this difficulty. Things should be easy. Things should be pleasant. Things should be nice. But what I'm saying is that that's not actually true, and we can find out that's not really true. So we can stop administering the narcotic to ourselves, and then we can be awake to our purposefulness. So purposefulness is like, it doesn't have to be, it can be both short-term and long-term, and they kind of go together. Because if you think about short-term, Odysseus' crew has to get off the land and onto their ship so they can complete their return voyage. Long-term, they want to make their return home. They go together, though, because if they don't fulfill their short-term purpose, then they're not going to be able to complete their long-term purpose. And so in a similar way, we have to complete our short-term purpose, like stop administering the narcotic to ourselves, and we have to, and that will be in service of our long-term purpose. So we don't even necessarily always have to know what the long-term purpose is, although we can always just remember that our long-term purpose is to resolve all that is unresolved, so that we're no longer perceiving that we need the narcotics. We no longer need to be telling ourselves that this shouldn't be. We no longer need to do those kinds of things, because we have clarity that we're home. We've succeeded. We've resolved what needs to be resolved. So, okay, so you've got this one problem that I've invited you to consider. And now you can just notice how you habitually try and avoid it. And maybe that's clear to you, and maybe it's not clear to you. So sometimes it's easier than other times. I mean, well, it'll be easier the more conscious you are of the whole process. But oftentimes a lot of it is unconscious. We don't even know that we're doing it. Recently I was thinking about how school children will develop all kinds of ailments, headaches and tummy aches and things like that. And usually, they don't want to go to school. And there's all kinds of reasons they don't want to go to school, but they can't, they're not often conscious enough of all of that to be able to communicate it. They just perceive that they're in this bind. They don't want to have to face it. So here's a way out. And they're not, often not consciously constructing the whole thing, but it comes about. And so only when they're adults who are themselves conscious enough and patient enough and so forth are they able to work these things out and get to the bottom of it and figure out, okay, what's really going on. The kids, so many different possibilities, so many kinds of distresses that the child is experiencing, and they don't want to have to face it. So the physical ailments are a way around that, in a sense. And I was thinking about this mostly because I was thinking about how it's not like we don't grow out of that for the most part, that we continue to do the same thing. And the work of John Sarno, who many of you have heard me talk about, demonstrates that. He saw tens of thousands of patients over decades, and his long-term success rate in helping people to resolve chronic pain is better than 80%, which compared to the less than 2% of standard medical treatment is outstanding. And his approach was to view the pain as an expression of unresolved, most primarily rage, but any kind of unresolved emotion. So we've got these. So maybe you're aware of what it is, and maybe you're not aware of what it is. And my point in that little tangent was to just say that sometimes we're largely unconscious of how of what it is that we're trying to avoid, and how we go about trying to avoid it. But maybe you can become aware of that just by looking, just by being open to that. Just another way of expressing this, let me say that we can view that we are not responsible for our own experience. And by and large, I would say that the dominant culture is pretty supportive of that view, fairly happy to point the finger and blame somebody else. So it's your parents' fault, it's your spouse's fault, it's the government's fault, it's religion's fault, it's your employer's fault, it's whoever's fault, somebody's fault. Or it's because of something that happened in the past, it's just time or accidents or whatever. It's something, it's not your responsibility. You're not responsible for your own experience. Something or somebody else is. So that's one possibility. And I would say that is in the big picture, that is a really terrible and ultimately dissatisfying view. And I would say that's primarily because it's untrue. So the alternative to that would be to accept that you are responsible for your experience. Well, that tends to raise hackles. People are uncomfortable with that because then, but surely it's somebody else's fault. I can't be responsible for all of my experience. Somebody else has got to be to blame for some of it, at least. Surely I'm a victim in some way, at least a small way. Please let me be a victim of something. But if you look at it in the way that I look at it, then you'll see it the way that I see it, which is really a good, empowering thing, which is to accept that I'm responsible for my experience, all of it entirely, means that I actually have the power to change it. See, if somebody else or something else is responsible for my experience, then I'm powerless to produce any change. No matter what I do, if somebody or something else has power over my experience, it really is totally pointless for me to do anything or attempt anything, because I don't have the power. Somebody else or something else has it. But when I accept that I have the responsibility for my own experience, then I have the power to produce change. So I see that as a really good thing. And but it probably, it will, if we're really honest about it, at some point at least, it will be uncomfortable for us to engage with that idea that I am responsible for all of my experience, that I'm not a victim in any way, not a victim of anybody else, not a victim of time, not a victim of circumstance, not a victim, period. And so if I really accept that, then I'm faced with all of my experience as opportunity for me to take that responsibility so that I can resolve what's unresolved. So again, think about this problem, whatever it may be, and notice how you have imagined that you're a victim, that somebody else or something else is to blame or responsible for your experience. So that maybe it's something that happened in the past due to somebody else or just due to accident or circumstance, but that it's just done, and so you're just a victim in that way. Or that it's maybe presently being done to you by somebody else or by some other entity of some kind. And see that there's no way out of that. um, I mean, well, certainly if it's in the past, there's no way out, and if it's in the present, unless you believe that you have the ability to overcome the oppression, then there's not really a way out of that. And just notice then, when you imagine that you're a victim, that you don't have 100% responsibility, how do you feel? Sarno, as I've already said, found that I think you would largely say that it always came down to rage. I don't know if he's right about that, but it makes sense that at least in a good majority of the cases, it would be rage, because so seems a pretty appropriate response to a sense that of being powerless, victimized. But it's also it eats away at us. It's very harmful to have this rage or this unresolved monster in our consciousness, that we perceive that we're unable to resolve. So it's like in the stories, it's like uh, the monster that has taken it's eating the children of the village or whatever, and the people are complicit in it because they. I'm reminded there's a story in Norse mythology where there's a king who has there's a some troll who has I think he has 12 heads, and he perceives he needs some humans to scratch his ears or something like this for all of his heads, and he needs 12, and there's some king who has 12 daughters, so the troll tells the king, I need your daughters, give them to me. If you don't give them to me, then I'll terrorize your kingdom. And the king's like, well, what can I do? I'm powerless, I can't do anything about this, so here, take my daughters. So we're complicit in this. This is the point. We're complicit when we perceive that here's this monster that is terrorizing us, threatening us, and so we just keep handing over our children. And so that's what this rage, when we don't meet it in a healthy way, in a conscious way, that's what it does to us. It just keeps eating our children, but we're complicit in the matter. As long as we're saying something else is responsible, though, something else is to blame, someone or something else is to blame, then we're like the king who's like, what can I do? But he's the one handing over the children, you see. What he could do is not hand over the children. That's what he could do. And that's what we can do as well. So, but the first step is to acknowledge I'm not a victim. I have power. I'm not only do I have power, but I'm actually using that power and abusing the power presently. You see? So the king has the power. The king is using that power to hand over his daughters. We can use our power by bringing the light of consciousness to the situation and acknowledging that I have the power. And rather than abusing the power, I can say, hold on a second. Let me really reconsider this for a moment. So back to the original question that I asked, what is the purpose? Why are you here? So this king in this story, he can think, well, I'm just here to not have conflicts, I'm just here to have an relatively easy time. I don't want any trouble for myself or my subjects. So as long as that's the belief, then when the troll comes along and says, give me your daughters, he'll say, what can I do? I have to give you my daughters because that's the only option. But if instead the king says, wait a second, hold on, let me really evaluate more honestly and sincerely the situation, then maybe he can see, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe my purpose is not just to have no conflict. Maybe my purpose, at least in the short term, is to protect my daughters. Like a very sort of primal kind of thing that we don't have to. If we overthink it, we can come to any kind of conclusion. But if we just go with our gut, we know what the truth is in that situation. No self-respecting parent is going to hand their daughters over to the troll. So here we have a problem. Whatever the problem is, you're imagining this problem, and then you notice that you have in some way imagined yourself a victim, that you don't have 100% responsibility. But then see how it is that you have been using or abusing your actual power, and metaphorically handing over your children to this monster, this rage that's there inside of you that's eating your children. So, okay, now this might not immediately give a sense that there's any, it might give an immediate sense of clarity about, well, now what do I do? Because it seems like an uncomfortable situation. So, okay, maybe I can recognize that there's some rage here. Maybe I can acknowledge that. But what do I do about that? Because if I let this rage out, then I just go postal or something. But we have to tell the truth and see that we're already doing tremendous damage by suppressing this. So knowing and seeing that that's true, we know that we must do something differently. So we don't want to let ourselves off in that way. That just because it's not immediately clear, just because it's not immediately easy, doesn't mean that this is the wrong approach, or that we're unable or inadequate. It just means that this is a challenge for us. And I would say that that's a good sign when we encounter a challenge and we see that our immediate reaction is to try and avoid it in some way, that this is actually part of our purpose, that we are here to resolve this. So avoiding it won't help us. Avoiding it will just continue to make things worse, actually. I mean, there's so many of these stories of the monster that eats the children. So it's in so many different cultures. There's a story, Chinese story, that a dragon who's, I think it's a dragon, some kind of monster that is doing the same kind of thing, this village. And every year it strikes a deal with them. Every year they have to send one of their children. And if they send one of their children each year, so that the lizard, the thing, whatever, the monster will eat it, then the monster won't terrorize them. Previously, he had been terrorizing them. So for many years, this is what they do, until one year, there's a girl who volunteers to be delivered up to the monster, and she slays the monster. In the Norse version, none of the knights would go to attack the troll. Same kind of thing. They say, well, what can we do? Troll's too powerful. We can't possibly overcome this troll. But there's one boy who goes and finds his way into the troll's lair and slays the troll. So there is a way. There's always a way. But the first thing that we have to do is we have to have the will. We have to be clear that enough is enough. It's not working and we can't continue to do it. So with the problem, whatever this problem is, big or small. Just see that enough is enough. How much longer can you continue in this way to be playing the victim? How much longer will you allow yourself to betray yourself? And hopefully you see that you can't allow that any longer, that it really is enough. You've had enough of it. So then you're faced with, okay, boy, this is daunting. All of the great warriors were unwilling to take on this task. They all threw up their hands and said, what can I do? So the temptation is for me to do the same, but that's why I have to block the way to my usual way by getting clear that enough is enough. I can't continue in this way. That's not the purpose of my life. Otherwise I'm just like I'll just continue to be stuck on this land of lotus eaters, narcotizing myself. Again, I don't know if it's a word, but yeah, I think you know what I mean. Otherwise, what is the purpose of that? It doesn't actually give me the real deep satisfaction that I'm here for. It doesn't resolve anything. It just keeps me in this holding pattern. And what would be what am I hoping for with all of that? Because if I eke it out through this lifetime, but I haven't resolved the things that I'm here to resolve, if I haven't fulfilled my purpose, then what? Then we can try and comfort ourselves by saying, oh, well, then nothing, because the who I am is only just a piece of meat, and consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, and so there's nothing after death. Or we could go another way, and we could tell ourselves, oh, well, but this is all just a dream, and so when it's over, I'll just be awake. But if you're not awake now, why do you think you'll be awake then? You see, it's like people think that when they're awake in the waking state that they're actually awake, but just pay attention. You'll see that you're rarely awake. You're no more awake in the waking state than you are in the dream state. So, but in our moments of wakefulness, and you can be awake right now, you can actually consciously choose to be awake, be very sober for a moment, and you can see that what you deeply long for, a true resolution, true satisfaction, true purposefulness, is attainable, actually, but it's not attainable by continuing to put yourself to sleep, just by continuing to do what you've done by imagining yourself to be a victim and throwing up your hands and saying, what can I do? Just because it's challenging, just because you don't know what to do, doesn't mean that it's not purposeful and important, and that you're not actually perfectly designed for it. All it means is that you haven't yet resolved it. It's like all things. Until you have the experience of riding a bicycle, you could tell yourself that it's impossible. But once you have the experience, then you know that it's possible. And so all things are like that. Until we actually have the experience, we can tell ourselves that it's impossible. But that doesn't mean it's true. It just means that we're telling ourselves that. And that's one of the benefits of awake people, is that they can tell us it's possible, because it was possible for me, and I was just as asleep as you. I was just as much playing a victim as you. I was just as much suffering as you. I was, when people can serve as an example, and they can say, look, I was no better off than you, but I was able to succeed. So you too can succeed. In fact, you're in a better position. You have more than I had. So you can do it for sure. That's important, but they can't do what we need to do for us. They can only uh, encourage us and inspire us. So just see with this problem, whatever the problem is that you're imagining that you're starting with, block the way back. So there has to be this point of no return, and you have to cross that threshold. So cross the threshold. Just say, I won't go back. I can't go back. There's no way back any longer. And you could even imagine it. Imagine, close your eyes and imagine that you're crossing that threshold. And that once you cross the threshold, it's like a magical thing that whatever you just came from, it's no longer accessible. It's gone. It vanishes. And so now your only way is the way forward. You have to continue and see it through. And so now you might probably very likely perceive that you don't know what to do about any of it. You don't know what any of this means. You don't know. It might be uncomfortable. Okay, I'm not even sure what any of to do with any of this. I just feel uncertainty, confusion, discomfort, anger, frustration, sadness, whatever it is. But okay, you see, the thing is that was there all along, but you were denying it, projecting it elsewhere. So now you've crossed that threshold. Now you're owning it. Now you're responsible, and now you're going to take the steps that are required. And you don't know what those are in advance. So how's that for relaxation? But now you see maybe possibly what I was talking about when I was saying that it's not passive, it's an engaged relaxation. So no hero's story goes like this. The hero starts out on an adventure and gets tenser and tenser and tenser and tenser and tenser and tenser, and then finally freaks out and dies. At least not a very good, it wouldn't be a very good story. So there has to be, in this journey, in this process that we're undertaking, there has to be a discovery of this active, engaged relaxation where we realize, okay, out of ignorance and out of habit, I tend to get tense. I tend to fall into these tense habits of worry and apprehension and fear and negativity and self-defeating kinds of imaginings where I just tell myself that I can't and I don't have what it takes and I'll never succeed and life's too difficult and everybody knows that it just gets worse and worse and yada, 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 all these various things that I've been in the habit of believing and imagining that just lead to more and more tension. And then the only way that I've known how to deal with that in the past was to go to the land of the lotus eaters and eat some lotus so that I can just go unconscious, not have to just be able to imagine for a moment that none of it's there, but then it comes back, and so then I have to eat more lotus. And so that's not a true relaxation. That's a passive kind of relaxation, but it doesn't give the true kinds of results that are actually meaningful and substantial in our lives. So this engaged relaxation means that we're not going to zone out. We're not going to narcotize ourselves. We're not going to try and go unconscious, but we're going to remain very conscious and just keep seeing that, okay, even though I don't, here's this, it seems like this great big monster, of a problem. And it might even be like the Hydra in the story of Heracles. The Hydra is one of the monsters that Heracles has to defeat. And the Hydra is in this cave in the dark, so can't be seen. So it's a bit like that at times. Here we don't even, there's this terrible monster lurking there in the darkness of the unconscious, and we have no idea. We can't see it. We can't find it. We don't know, but it's there. We know it's there, but we just can't find it. So many possibilities of how the challenge can manifest. But rather than fall back on all of the ways that we've fallen back on in the past, which are kinds of passive relaxation, which don't give us the real results, we have to engage with this very consciously and have an engaged relaxation, so that we become aware of how is it that I habitually tense up in all these various ways, physically, mentally, emotionally. How do I tense up, make myself very brittle, fragile? Imagine that I'm weak, easily fatigued, that I don't have what it takes. And instead of doing all that, let me in this engaged, active way, relax those tendencies so that I can be more present, more alert, more conscious, and more able to utilize my resources in an intelligent and focused way to achieve my goal of resolving this thing. So even though in this 1 hour, we may not completely resolve the thing, we can be well on our way and have the knowledge that we will succeed. So just know that you are designed to succeed. You are made purposefully. You are made exactly to resolve these things. So there's nothing accidental about it. You have been made like a glove to fit these challenges, so that there is an absolute perfect fit. You have within you the capacity, the potential to meet these challenges and resolve them. And there's no doubt or question about that. It's not, there's nothing about it that's left to chance. The only question is when and how long. And that just depends on your willingness. So again, if you cross that threshold, if you're willing to do that much, then you're guaranteed success in the soonest way. So I encourage you to cross the threshold just with this one problem. It doesn't have to be, Heracles had 12 labors. So it's not like, he didn't have to do all of them at the same time. So you just do this one. Don't worry about all the rest of them. Just this one, whatever it is. And then whatever is next will present itself. And it works like that. So just be present to this thing. So again, it is coming back to this active, engaged relaxation. If we notice how we, if we're committed to this process of this active, engaged relaxation, then we notice all the ways in which we undermine that. And through that noticing, we can choose to stop doing that. So one of the ways we undermine this engaged relaxation is by biting off more than we can chew, by saying, oh, but I have to do all of it. I've got all of these problems and all of the problems of all of life, and it's too big. So obviously that's not a very good way to approach it. So we don't need to do that. And instead we can just keep it simple. Just tell yourself, yeah, but I don't have to do all of that right now. The only thing that I'm committing to right now is this, just this. So whatever this is, whatever this unresolved feeling, whatever this is presently, all I have to do is be present to this, meet this, engage with this. And through that process, I'm guaranteed success. The same as Heracles. He when he encounters the Hydra, Heracles is sort of like, he's just, when he starts out particularly, he's just sort of a brute. He'd been classically educated, but he was really just brutish. And so he came to the Hydra. He brings a club. This is his weapon. I'm going to club it. If it moves, club it. This is the thinking of Heracles, because it had worked for him up to that point, but with the Hydra, that's not going to work. So he had to, if he just kept trying to club it, well, the thing about the Hydra, in case you didn't know, is you could cut off one head or club one head, but then more heads will sprout from it. So that's not, we can't use that same tactic that we've used with things, the unconscious tactic. That won't work. We have to be present and intelligent and engaged and see, okay, here's this thing that I keep doing that gets me in trouble. I just keep doing this, and then the Hydra sprouts more heads. So stop doing that and start to engage with it in an intelligent way. So in the story, this was this challenge was an opportunity for Heracles to, I guess we could say, develop his intellect a bit, to be a bit more patient, to slow down a little bit, and to use different tactics, to think a little bit. So this is what we have to do. We have to slow down and just see, wow, that doesn't work. So stop doing that. And you'll see, just as I'm describing, that the challenge is the opportunity. It is perfectly designed. It's like a puzzle. It's a test. If you imagine the Hydra is a divine test that is a puzzle that unlocks the flowering of the intellect, that it unlocks these capacities that up to that point were unaccessed, undeveloped. So our lives present us with all these challenges that are custom tailored to present us with exactly the opportunities to help us grow in the perfect way that will give us the deepest satisfaction, so that we can really have a sense that we've discovered and learned what we needed to discover. So rather than seeing the problems as problems, we can start to see them as opportunities, which will be very helpful since we've crossed the threshold and can't go back. So that is where we'll leave it today. And I'll be happy to stay on for Q&A for those who are here live, but I'm going to end this recording. And I guess I should just say a word of encouragement for anybody who's not going to be able to stay on for the Q&A. So for those who are watching on YouTube, again, you can do it. You're designed to succeed. There's no question about it whatsoever. So you have what it takes. Blessings to you.